What do you do with the bad Glassdoor reviews? Today we'll be talking about that on Culture Builder Live. Hey, I am Chris Wink. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Technical.ly. We're a news organization with a community of technology professionals. Over the next few weeks, Culture Builder Live will be diving into some of the trickier topics ahead of our annual Introduced conference coming back in person Thursday, May 12th. In-person component will be in Philadelphia. We will, though, have a range of pre-recorded conversations and sessions on the tough topics that you'll be able to dig into in person. So check out Introduce. We'll make sure to put a link in the chat. But today, the first conversation we're having is among the trickier ones. Reputation management, the good, the bad, the ugly. To do that, I'm joined by Megan Huey. She is an experienced people ops professional. We have turned to her in many circumstances for the tough topics because she's done a range of consultative work and in-depth in-house agency and wow, what am I trying to say? In-house people ops work. Megan, save me and say hello. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much. Good to be here.
Pleasure, Megan. I always appreciate your perspective. So the broad category of reputation management, employer reputation management, Glassdoor iconically helped establish this category. Kudos to them. Part of one of the major players in reputation management and recruiting technology. They're not the only one, as we'll get into, but they helped set the course. You, in a lot of different roles in people ops, in startup, in mid-stage, in growth stage, you've had to talk and think about this both for yourself and for clients. So maybe start with me. When you think reputation management, if you're giving advice to others, what is the underlying philosophy you take into employer reputation management?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great opportunity more than anything else, just for companies to engage with people who formerly worked with them and they would like to also recruit because I think people have used this kind of stuff in a lot of cases to make decisions on, is this the kind of place I want to work? So employers using that as an opportunity to engage, responding to reviews, I think can really be a powerful tool. And having those exchanges sort of in a public sphere, there's not very many places you can do that. Like I said, there's a few of them, but Glassdoor is definitely the first place I think a lot of people think about when they go to start doing some of the research on joining a company.
I like what you just said about it's an opportunity. Glassdoor is one of many sites that have pestered lots of HR professionals. But what you're alluding to is the word reputation means this is what people are talking about you behind your back. People were doing this before any of these sites existed. You're noting that this just gives you the opportunity to actually see it and respond.
Sure. Yeah. Having the opportunity to respond to these things, I think gives you sort of at least a seat at the table or something that gives you an opportunity to share your perspective. I think that's really tricky to do sometimes, depending upon how the reviews are structured and what they're saying about you. But if nothing else, it leaves you with an opportunity to provide, some context for the conversation or some additional insight that maybe candidates wouldn't get if they were just, reading the reviews on their own.
Well said. Okay. Reputation management, where does this live? The title of this conversation is focused on Glassdoor because they help set the standard. It's not the only one. Talk to me about where else we should be thinking.
Oh, there's some great sites that I think people aren't even looking at, or maybe they are, but I mean, I look at lots of them. Things like Reddit threads about your company. You can look at a lot of different things, Fishbowl, Comparably, Blind. I think Blind is a really interesting one. They post a lot of information about compensation, which I know is a hot topic right now. And so, getting out there and reading what people are saying and also being aware of it provides you with some strategic advantage so that you're able to kind of know how to approach some of those conversations when you do get, to have a conversation with candidate if you're recruiting or your own employees. At least what they're reading and what kind of information they're consuming before they come to the table to either negotiate a raise or other things like that. So I think it's a really important thing to know what's being said, and then also not just looking at people who've exited, but your current employees, what they're saying too, because you can get feedback through surveys internally, but what's going on externally in those conversations on Glassdoor is important to be aware of.
The exit interview, staff surveys, in some sense, these were the classic holders of reputation management. These sites have made them external. There's still those tools worth relying on.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think having those, at least in a way that you're checking them regularly and setting up the alerts so that you're getting them, is the very, basic piece of it. But then being able to know what to say in response, I think is difficult, and certainly not something for the faint of heart.
It does. I do have some sympathy for companies and HR pros in the reputation management game, because this is obviously like a really easy way for a platform to make you care. Like, we will have anonymous statements about your company publicly. There's a bit of a
Sure.
hostage situation there. Is there a limit to how many sites we're willing to give to give mind?
Sure. I mean, you can't over rotate towards what everybody else is saying. You still have to have the kind of
Right.
a center of what are you trying to accomplish, and being aware of it's one thing, but yeah, chasing the reviews and making sure that you've chased down every single corner of the internet in which someone said something about your company is impossible. But knowing where the conversation is happening and not just assuming it's only in one place is, I think, a good place to start.
Well said. And we'll come here in a moment to the inevitable logic that there are very different kinds of bad reviews and bad reputations, which we'll get to in a moment. But let's perhaps start in the life cycle. Let's assume you're either early stage company, or you're a smallish company, or for whatever reason you've escaped negative reviews for a period of time and you've now seen your first bad review. It is on Glassdoor, it's on Blind, it's somewhere, it's an anonymous Twitter account, whatever, where you first confront someone who's purporting to be a current or former staff member who is giving negative feedback. Let's assume not overly toxic. We'll get to that in a moment. Let's assume kind of more straightforward. They didn't deliver on the expectations I had for this workplace. What's your guidance to an HR pro who's in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think if it's someone who's currently at your company, that's a great opportunity to engage them in an offline dialogue and offer that in a very clear way. And I think if it's someone who's not at your company anymore, you can always thank them for their review, because I think it's important to meet them where they are and acknowledge that their experience is what it is, right? Like it's not necessarily something you have to agree with, but acknowledging that this person took the time to write feedback on in a public setting, and being able to say that acknowledge where they are, but also being able to see what is and isn't true. So if it's something that's egregiously false, you don't have to kind of point by point go through and tell them why they're wrong, but acknowledge it and then say, here are some of the facts behind this without sounding defensive. And again, I think being really thoughtful about the language you use is probably important in doing something like that. And then again, if it's somebody that's currently on your team, definitely trying to engage them in a conversation and offering them multiple ways of going about that, even if it's not with you. So if they have an issue with the HR department or the people department, offering another alternative, but trying to get them to have the conversation in a productive way that provides actionable feedback, that could hopefully lead to some positive change in the areas that they're talking about.
A obvious theme that you're hitting on is just how different negative feedback can be. You noted there is a spectrum here from egregiously untrue or nuanced, and we all know that as professionals, that often in those moments it matters more how someone feels. The facts are much less important. Someone feels wronged, it's a lot more important to understand why does someone feel wrong. If this is these are flags for you as a people ops professional. Is something very wrong here? And I wonder what advice you might give to someone. How do you categorize this feedback has merit, we must pay attention to, this is urgent, or hey, I just think someone's not having a great day or didn't have a good circumstance, we have to chalk it out? Like, do you picture those buckets and kind of separate them out?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think you have to think about it as, I think, like you mentioned, is this like an indication of a much larger systemic thing? And if so, there's probably a bigger conversation that you don't want to go about it just by yourself. You want to actually start to really look at what is the specific information they're providing that would lead you to think that way. If it's a negative individual experience, not everybody is going to like working at your company, and not every single person is going to have a great experience there. You can do your best, but it's unlikely you're going to be 100% on that. And so if it's something that is a general comment that is, this company is not a good place to work, there's not a lot that you can acknowledge that they feel that way, But with general comments that are so broad like that, I think it's really difficult to be able to actionably, respond in a way that would be satisfactory. I think you can still try, but I don't think that, those broad generalizations are helpful. When it comes to really specific things, and if it's something that looks like a very, a large problem across the organization, then I think it's probably worth engaging other people in the conversation and saying, look, we need to kind of take a look at this. This is pretty problematic or concerning. Things, especially if it's stuff that is related to, legal issues or compliance issues, you want to make sure that you're paying attention to those things and involving more people so that you're not kind of going at it alone, making sure that you're, taking it seriously and actually taking action.
Crucial point, right? Like reputation management is very different than the legal and compliant and formal and traditional HR channels. That's why this has developed its own discipline. This is something that's much more akin to employer brand marketing. How are people talking about us, and how do we authentically engage and make sure that we think the truest narrative is out? A point here that has come up, and it can be a point of contention. What is the right amount of encouragement an employer can make for satisfied employees, encouraging satisfied employees to post or share? Is there a way to do that is still genuine and effective, or can it always seem too ham-fisted to send the email, hey, everyone, please goodness, go write something nice about us?
Well, I think it depends on the values of your company too, and what you're trying to accomplish by asking. But I often say, when people provide positive feedback just verbally, or hey, this was really great, I love this part about working here, I always would just say, hey, go put that on Glassdoor, go make sure you include that information, rather than just sort of a blanket call for please go provide feedback. And also, I think it matters the person asking. If it's your people ops person always asking, it probably doesn't always come across as authentic as it would if your CEO is the one kind of out there, or your engineering leader, or someone else in your team. So I think it's more of a collective posture of, do we as a company want to go request feedback? And if so, you kind of embed that in other things rather than just kind of forcing people to go out and get Glassdoor reviews posted. But I do think there's probably you can probably push that too much, and then you probably won't like what you see if you're pushing it too much. People are saying, I was forced to post this, that kind of thing. That probably has some diminishing returns.
Yeah, they could be even worse.
Right.
This, for our newsroom, the newsroom at Technical.ly, Glassdoor and these other reputation management services is a tool that can, make me uncomfortable sometimes. Like, we try to talk internally that, look, any organization of a certain size or certain growth rate, there's going to be some negative feedback. I honestly, I almost feel like we could have our own like average percentage, like this amount of diminishing reviews are gonna be there. But it has been a smoke point that we've then followed, that we will get more emails than you might expect of folks saying, hey, have you seen how these reviews have turned over here? Have you seen that? And our newsroom will like poke around sometimes, or there will be a way for us to understand if something else is happening. Like it tends to be, the reputation management is not the core problem when it's bad. It is just a symptom of something else happening, which makes me not wanting to, at the risk of biting off more than we can chew, to take the other extreme of, if you are a people ops person who's starting a role, or you are part of an organization that has had a really big turn and reviews and morale is down and reviews are getting worse, is there something to be done? Do you have any of that top level feedback for, at the risk of using the phrase, a toxic brand when the negative reviews outweigh the positive reviews?
Oh, well, I don't envy someone in that situation. I think I don't think that's something you can fix just by responding to Glassdoor. But I think it's worth, at a minimum, involving. I think it's easy to kind of be go at these kinds of things alone, but more likely, I think you would have a better chance of maybe not reversing, but at least acknowledging or confronting a potentially toxic brand by involving other people. And that means, saying, hey, everybody on the leadership team, we're going to look at this one together, and we're going to take one of our, offsites, and we're going to decide how do we want to respond to these, 600 negative reviews or whatever it is. And I think at a minimum, it's not, going to address every single concern, but you're not doing it by yourself, for one. And then two, you're also, looking at the scale of what it is, and kind of back to your previous question, is this something systemic? Sounds like if you've got that much negative review, maybe it is. And then share what you're doing about it. A lot of the reviews that I find most valuable are the ones where people say, look, you're right, this thing was really bad. We did not handle whatever the situation was well, but here's what happened in the intervening, 6 months since this review was posted. Like, there's value in doing that too, and saying, look, we're not perfect. We're a company just like everybody else, but we are making strides to improve some of these things. And I think if you're doing the internal work and then sharing it externally, you can do some reversal, and probably more importantly, reversing the internal toxic stuff is probably most important.
The theme that I've heard over the last few minutes is reputation management is a symptom, not your core problem, if there is a problem. And I can testify from reporting we've done. I can say that not all organizations, and certainly not all people ops leaders, that they often do see this as an isolated incident. Those negative reviews are purely mad employees. They're not telling a true story, and that has been a narrative that I've struggled with, because it does feel like, man, you're right that this is probably not the biggest problem, and we only have a bit of the apple because it happens to be public, but surely something's afoot. This is not a few isolated, but something bigger.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it too, and have, are your competitors reading this information and figuring out how to go recruit the people that are still there? Again, if you don't know, and you're not even at least acknowledging or looking at it, it's going to be pretty hard for you to, be competitive against the, poaching of your employees. So at a minimum, you need to look at it.
Well said. All right, send us out any behaviors generally in reputation management among entrepreneurs, people ops, organizations that you'd like to see change.
Oh, I mean, I really would love to see, more humanizing language in those responses, giving the HR response of all employees shall type thing. It just comes across as sort of tone deaf. You're engaging with a person, you're not writing a policy. And I think, I think one of the other things is, and I've kind of acknowledged this a few times, is, there should be other people responding. It should not just be up to people ops. It should be the CEO. It should be your other leaders. Because I think, in many cases, that can be a really powerful statement of how engaged your leadership is in the conversation about people. You can say people matter all the time, but if the only person interacting with the unhappy people is the HR department, then most likely you're probably going to end up with the same results. And that's a pretty lopsided equation. So I'd like to see more of that. And I think also being really conversational in the tone, and making sure to highlight the actionable things and offering those kinds of opportunities for dialogue offline. Or I think I'd like to see more companies do that, but lots are doing it well.
Megan, that is a great way to go out. Megan, I so appreciate the conversation. Thank you. This has been this week's Culture Builder Live. As noted, the next series of Culture Builder Lives will be Takeover, promoting Technical.ly's Introduced Conference, Thursday, May 12th. We'll put the link in the chat below, but we will see you at Introduced May 12th. Thanks, as always, for these engaging conversations on building better companies. Megan, we'll see you again soon. We'll see everyone else next week. Thanks so much. Bye.